Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Good afternoon. I am your host, Kiana Canada. Welcome to Kiana's Show. Well, it's not really the afternoon, it's moving towards evening, so good evening. I recorded this video earlier, but I deleted it because it was incomplete, and I recorded it in the morning and realized that I needed to get out of the house to go grocery shopping. And so there was much of the information that I wanted to add into the live stream that was depleted from it. And so I'm going to replenish this live stream with that information and expound on the theories of transnational repression. So welcome back to Kiana's Show. If you haven't already, go ahead and get yourself a cocktail, a drink, a tea, a water, whatever you drink, and make yourself at home, relax, and we are going to get into this discussion. So this afternoon, before we get into it, I went out to a buffet. I was curious about eating at a buffet and in Belfast because I haven't done that before. And so I looked up this buffet called Cosmos and decided to go to that buffet. And God, it was pouring down, raining everywhere. Just raining. And so I hadn't spent a lot of my time here in Belfast eating out. I've eaten out at a few places, but I said, you know what, Kiana, treat yourself. Go ahead and eat out and get out and experience. Get out and experience what it's like, right? To go to a buffet here. And so I did go to Cosmos this afternoon, and it wasn't all that I expected. It wasn't what I liked, and regrettably, most of the dishes weren't anything that I would have wanted to take home. Unfortunately, the only thing at Cosmos that was delicious, I have to say, in my personal opinion, the savory dishes was, of course, their shrimp. But the problem with that was that they didn't devein it. And so I was there deveining the shrimp, all of the shrimp, and I was like, okay, this is too much. And then the sweet dish that was so delicious was this honey cake that they had. Oh my God, that was so delicious. This honey cake was so delicious. But would I return to Cosmos? Probably not. It was not up to par. I had gone to some fast food restaurants here in Belfast that I think gives Cosmos a run for its money. And I think the reason why it's really not good eating is because they're cooking this food and putting this food out very quickly, right? So that was just my experience this afternoon. I went to Cosmos, to a buffet, tried something different, and made an attempt, which I believed I was successful at, in enjoying something here in the city. But this evening, what we are going to be discussing is whether or not intelligence agencies are the real criminals. Are they the real criminals? Are they engaging in criminality? Or are they really investigating crime? Is the question. Now, throughout the Mimicking McCarthyism series, as well as a number of episodes on my channel, I often refer to Irish American intelligence agencies. And I explain that this is a portmanteau of Irish intelligence agencies as well as American intelligence agencies working together, collaborating, cooperating with each other, sharing intelligence. And in a way that would significantly harm a person. And that is what we are going to be talking about this afternoon, or rather this evening. But what was my introduction to Irish people? And when I talk about Irish people, it often appears as if what I'm speaking about is always negative. And that negative frame, I think, is substantially owed to the very fact that Ireland is complicit and a perpetrator of transnational repression, so as the United States of America. But my first encounter with Irish people was within the United States of America in my home city, Austin, Texas. And I met three Irish men who was sitting at a pub in my city in the warehouse district, and I passed by them and they stopped me and we began to talk and developed a conversation and began to speak to each other and just had a phenomenal time with each other. There was this one Irish guy that really liked me and was attracted to me. The feelings weren't mutual, but what I liked about our time together, the three guys and myself, was that we just had a ball when I showed them around Austin, and we really did enjoy each other's company. And so that's how I became acclimated to Irish people, and from that point forward, I always had a very positive opinion about Irish people. Didn't think anything negative about Irish people, didn't know much about Irish people until I fled to the Republic of Ireland and sought asylum. And as we know, when I sought asylum in the Republic of Ireland, Ireland shared the details of my asylum claim. I believe the evidence, of course, is leading to that very fact with the United States. If not Ireland, then some, as I explained in the Mimicking McCarthyism series, there was a asylum seeker who actually picked up my parcel that had my asylum claim, and he ran off with it for several hours and didn't bring it back till like 12 o'clock in the morning. And there was this whole making me doubt my reality about his intention, because when he left in the afternoon and sped away on his bike, and he took my parcel to somewhere and kept it there for a significant period of time. And I believe that my parcel was taken, that the information was altered, and that he brought back an inauthentic copy of my asylum decision. If not that, then he definitely took my asylum information to someone. The question is, who? And we're not going to be canvassing that question in this live stream, because I already believe that this is Ireland, of course, and the United States working in concert with each other to carry out acts of transnational repression. And if you are new to this live, you may be wondering, well, what is transnational repression? Transnational repression can be conceptualized as when states are using their diplomatic relations and their intelligence capacities to reach across borders to silence the dissent of their citizens. You may say, well, what is diplomatic relations? Diplomatic relations is through its consulates, through its embassies, and intelligence capacities could be through its intelligence agencies or cybersecurity agencies like NISOs, which is domiciled here in Belfast. And then we have ENZO, who hires the talent, the IT talent, and distributes that talent to NISOs Belfast, or NISOs Group Limited. And the research is evolving, and it demonstrates, and I've touched upon this multiple times during my episodes, that it need not be a person's state, their country, that is subjecting them to transnational repression. It could very well be a foreign nation that is doing it. But in order to come under, I guess, the purview of a foreign nation, putting a foreign national through transnational repression, that political activity or that journalistic activity or that human rights activity has to call out in a very public way the authorities of that foreign nation. And I want you to think about Julian Assange, who was a national of Australia, but released some very incriminating information against the United States, and the United States put Julian Assange through transnational repression. In my case, I wrote an article about the extrajudicial executions of Black Americans in the United States of America, as well as touched upon what I believe to be a morality policing phenomenon happening in direct provision that was being perpetrated and managed by a person of power. When I published that information in the Jurist and attached that independent research to the article, that's when the transnational reprisals increased. And of course, at the moment, I didn't know that this was transnational repression. What I just thought that it was what I thought was it was the group that I wrote about that did not like my political activity and was intimidating me and harassing me within my environment. But little did I know that it was the state, my country, and Ireland behind this intimidation. And they were telling people within my accommodation that, don't worry, what we are going to do, this is going to benefit us all. So what we're going to do to her will benefit us all. And what I noticed, what I saw in direct provision was a document that was distributed among the asylum seekers that I have a copy of that had these organizations on it and these allegations against me on this document. And so essentially what they would do is that they would tell the asylum seekers that if I complained about something, to forward me to this organization. And so it was almost like a hamster's wheel. So this organization would signpost me to this organization, that organization would signpost me to this organization, and it would go in a wheel where I was just going around in circles. And I think that was deeply concerning. It was deeply concerning that the organizations didn't ask me about my victimization, didn't seek to know more about it, but just took the authorities' word. And that let me know a couple of things: that there was coercive power at play, there was legitimate power at play, there was definitely referent power at play, where we had a very charismatic but manipulative authority figure in the midst who was telling them false information to gain their trust so that they wouldn't advocate on my behalf. And so, ladies and gentlemen, that leads us, I believe, to what we're going to talk about this evening, and that is proxy threats. And this is deeply concerning to me because I think it involves what is happening to my family members. And I am concerned that it has gone on this long, right? But in this slide, ladies and gentlemen, what I want to do as I go through the steps of transnational repression and coercion by proxy is to build upon Tim Field's bullying in sight. So Tim Field, wrote a book called Bullying in Sight. And a lot of the information, ladies and gentlemen, is definitely in that book connected in some way to the temperament and the personality and the tactics of perpetrators, the agents of persecution that carry out acts of transnational oppression. So Tim Fields defines bullying as it occurs when a person is in a position of power and authority. And so, as you know, I'm not in a position of power or authority. I have no power and I have no authority. If I did have power or if I did have authority, this would not have gone on this long. So this demonstrates that there is a power differential and that there is another person with the power that is the bully. So bullying occurs when a person in a position of power and authority feels threatened by a subordinate who is displaying qualities of ability, knowledge, skill, determination, and tenacity. And this, I think, frames our understanding of the bully, the agent of persecution from the start, that they're in a position of power and they feel threatened by my journalism. Had they not felt threatened by my journalism, then I would still be writing for The Jurist. Had they not felt threatened by my research on transnational repression, I would have written that dissertation on transnational repression. So they were threatened by my ability, my knowledge, my skill, and my determination to call out this state crime. And so Tim Fields argues that insecurity causes the bully to desire to control the victim by using aggressive physical and psychological strategies. And one of those psychological strategies is coercion by proxy. And you may say, well, Kiana, well, what is that? Well, the scholars define proxy punishment as using threats or violence within a regime's territory. So coercion by proxy doesn't take place within the host country, it takes place within the home country. And it usually is happening to that person's family members. So again, the evidence here is showing, like, I haven't threatened anybody's family members. The agents of persecution that is carrying out coercion by proxy is definitely the US and Ireland. Now, it is important to distinguish that every country has a different modus operandi when it comes to carrying out coercion by proxy. And the way in which Ireland and the US carries out this kind of behavior is through interrogatories and forced participation in regime propaganda. For example, when I called my family one day and I spoke about civil rights and spoke about representing Black people and delving back into the past, my family members seemed afraid to have those discussions. This is a true story. And ladies and gentlemen, that does not mean that I had always in my life looked back on history and tried to understand it. I remember years ago, I did not like to watch films about slavery because it was hurtful. And I remember a couple of family members of mine said that there's this new slave movie called Get Out. And I was like, I don't like slave movies. And I said, I don't like slave movies. And they said, but you'll like this one. Like, this one is like a very interesting one. And I think that Get Out is a very interesting and thought-provoking film with so many Easter eggs in it that we'll talk about another time. But again, the authorities will engage in forced participation in regime propaganda, right? And they use this to retaliate against human rights defenders like myself. So they'll engage in interrogatories. They'll send your family members a list of questions. And instead of them asking you these questions, it is your family members that are asking you these questions on the behalf of this person in power. And we'll get into why they do that a little bit later. But like bullying, transnational repression, and proxy threats, coercion by proxy, it occurs in private. And when we think about it, ladies and gentlemen, we often hear the dominant society say, where's the evidence? What is evidence? Show me the evidence, right? And this is really a charge against minorities, specifically Black Americans, to demonize them and to undercut their knowledge and their experience, their lived experience about being victimized, because in their minds, evidence always has to come out of the mouth of somebody white, a person within the dominant society. A person that is non-white, especially a Black person, can never be, in their personal opinion, a person that is an agent of change or a knowledgeable agent or an epistemic subject, somebody who is able to reason, to understand their victimization. And so they often say, well, where's the evidence? And the truth of the matter is that they are resistant to the evidence that's being put in front of them. And we'll get into that a little bit later as to why that is. But when we really reflect deeply on transnational repression, sometimes there are no witnesses or records or forensic evidence. And it is often our word against the perpetrator's words, because we know that they are in a position of power. And usually when we hear these conversations about evidence, it's really the person in power, the person in the dominant society, that is stacking the odds against us, stacking, power against us to continue to carry out their acts of what I would call state crimes. Now, again, they want to carry out their state crimes, and the way in which they do this is through subjugation and control. The principal aim of coercion by proxy is to establish control, essentially, to dominate, to subjugate, and to deny the victim the right of independence and self-determination. That is the reason why they engage in coercion by proxy, is because they don't want you or me to be a free agent. Again, I have made attempts to free myself from the United States by seeking to renounce my citizenship, seeking to move. Look, I'm in a foreign country. I'm in Belfast, Northern Ireland. If that is not evidence that I have sought to, emancipate myself from the United States, then what is? And what's holding me to the United States, of course, other than my family, is the United States refusing to agree to a divorce. Because the United States does not like the fact that a divorce would mean that I would be free of it, and that the allegations that I made against it would still be in place. But I think what's more important here is, how do perpetrators of transnational repression, how do they get away with it? Now, we were talking about this earlier, right? When we were talking about members of the dominant society bringing up evidence and being knowledge resistant when it comes to evidence, right? And a first element of why they refuse or why they bring up evidence is because of ignorance. They're choosing not to see the evidence. In other words, they're knowledge resistant. They're saying, you know what? I don't have time to look at that. I don't want to look at that. I want to believe what a person in power is saying because it's comfortable. Second is unenlightenment. So not understanding what transnational repression is and how it goes on and how to address it. That is essentially what I've heard when I attempt to have these conversations about transnational repression. So for example, when I'm talking to people in positions of power about transnational repression, oftentimes when I attempt to explain the phenomenon, they'll cut me off. And I say, okay, well, tell me what your understanding of transnational repression is. And they'll say, well, I don't have to tell you. And my response is, but this is what we're talking about, so it's important that somebody understands what that means. And I feel like I have a good understanding of it. And perhaps if you have an understanding of it, can you please express that to me? And they're unwilling to engage in this communication about transnational repression and unwilling to have a respectful discourse about it. And it has to do with unenlightenment, right? Refusing to understand, choosing not to understand, ignorance around it. And then there's also disbelief. So everybody's not always unenlightened. Sometimes there's disbelief around transnational repression. Sometimes there's denial. And sometimes there is acquiescence in our face. There is acquiescence happening in our face. And so my question is, and maybe you're wondering, is how have the Irish government and the US government maintained a hold on my sister without being uncovered? Well, I would argue that there is a level of threats, possibly, to silence her, so that there is a lack of acknowledgement around what they're doing. And there is interference where if I call my sister and we're having a conversation on the phone, they are instructing her to get off the phone very quickly. For example, when I called my sister on our birthday, I have a twin sister, as you know. I called her on my birthday, and on our birthday, and we spoke for like a nanosecond. And I don't think that that was of her own choosing. I think that she has been instructed by the US government not to contact me, not to hold conversations with me until they say that it's okay. When they say that she can talk to me, then she can talk to me. The only conversations that she's initiated were conversations that were interrogatory. So she would call, and then she would perform these interrogatories for the agents of persecution. And all of these other conversations and calls that I've made were calls that I've initiated myself, like over the last year. So my sister has only called me 3 to 4 times this year. And I 100% believe that this is because the agents of persecution, the agents of transnational repression, has a stranglehold on her and have been instructing her when to communicate with me, when to not communicate with me, because they're trying to simulate what I believe to be incommunicado detention. They're trying to simulate a bit of that incommunicado detention, and they're trying to simulate what I believe to be imprisonment. Because when you're in prison, you don't get to speak to your family members, and it's very rare that you speak to your family members, and sometimes they call you, sometimes they don't. And so they're trying to simulate that environment by preventing my sister from initiating communication with me. Now, how have they attempted to maintain a hold on me? Well, the cohorts, what I believe they've done is in the Republic of Ireland, as well as here in Northern Ireland, they have collaborated and contacted or hired some cohorts to act as both a smoke screen and a defense screen, so that the agent of transnational repression can remain in the background. So, for example, when I go to a law firm and I'm attempting to serve my statement of claim, or to serve a freedom of information request, and I have a security guard coming out and getting into my personal space and towering over me and intimidating me, the purpose of doing that is, or the reason why the security guard is doing that, is they've been instructed by the agents of transnational repression to create provocation, because they want the victim to respond to their provocation so that they can paint the victim as the aggressor. As an example, I went to Coercion-by-Proxy to serve a freedom of information request, and the moment that I entered the door, the security guard came out and said, "Hey, you can't be in here. You're not supposed to come in here." And I was like, I'll upload that video later, but because I have it on video. But I told the security guard, I know that you're trying to intimidate me, but I'm here. It's my legal right. It's my legal duty to serve these papers and to serve this freedom of information request. I know that you don't like that, but this is my right to do that. And I had to ask him several times to back out of my space, because there was one point during that encounter where he walked very close up to me and, like, in an aggressive, intimidating way, to try and manhandle me. And I said, "Please, I'm asking you kindly to move back away and out of my space." So this is all done for provocation. This is what the agents of transnational repression will do to gain control, because that's their whole purpose of doing this, is so that they can be in control. It's an obsession that they have with the victim, to control the victim's life, to control how other people see the victim. And because they're in a position of power, they're able to manipulate, and the masses able to manipulate the understanding of, or able to manipulate the broader, what I would call maybe these organizations or these human rights bodies or these law firms, able to manipulate their perception about who I am. For instance, there is no reason why that that security guard invaded in my personal space. He had no right to do that. And there's no reason why he should have wanted to do that. But he did that because he was instructed to do it. He was instructed to provoke. There's no rule that I can't go and hand deliver a Freedom of Information request. The only stipulation that appears to be in place is that this person that is the agent of transnational repression seeks to control, again, how I communicate with people. Because part of the communication is that they want to be a part of it. They want to read what is being put out there. They want to get a head start on the information, and they can't do that if I am hand delivering it to the appropriate bodies. And so if the appropriate bodies somehow share the information with the agents of persecution, then that demonstrates that they're complicit. And that is the reason why there is this need, this obsessive need for a person to communicate everything via email. We'll get into that another day. But let's go ahead and continue with the control that this agent of persecution has or attempts to maintain over me. When the agent of persecution instructs persons like the cohorts, such as the security guards, also there was a solicitor who they instructed as well. When they instruct the security guards, the solicitors, the community to provoke you, this allows them to sit back and watch and to keep their hands clean. And this is something that Tim Fields talks about in his book, Bullying, is that bullies will often contract people around them, cohorts, to carry out their action, to carry out this abuse on their behalf, so they can sit back and claim plausible deniability. And Tim Fields describes these persons as underlings. He says the underlings can be used to direct attention away from the bully. The underlings can be used to direct attention away from the agent of transnational repression. And with organizations such as the Northern Ireland Human Rights Commission, the Law Center, so we have the Northern Ireland Human Rights Commission, the Equality Commission, the Law Center, ENZO. These co-conspirators can back them up when complaints are made. So, for example, if I make a complaint against the agent of persecution, then we have the Northern Ireland Human Rights Commission coming in to protect the person, the perpetrator, as they have done in the past. We have the Equality Commission coming in and doing the same thing. We have the police ombudsman for Northern Ireland coming in and doing the same thing to protect the perpetrators. Nothing to see here, nothing to see here. Business as usual, nothing to see here. Now, I did have a very interesting conversation with the Northern Ireland Human Rights Commission one day on the street, but that does not absolve it from its past behavior and its complicity and overlooking the harm that has taken place on its soil. Now, what are some other transnational repression tactics? Well, this is a very interesting one, and it might even be, I would almost argue, it may even be perceptible to you, right? And it is this. Once an indiscretion has been identified, it is used as the basis for placing an individual on a competence procedure or a capability procedure. Now, where did this happen in my own life? This happened at Queen's University, Belfast. I was outspoken about transnational repression in my modules and with my cohorts, stating very clearly that the United States and as well as Ireland were perpetrators of this state crime and this illegal activity. And what happened? I was placed under a competence procedure, right? And that competence procedure was put into place to, I believe, it was implemented as a guise of, well, we're concerned about you, we're wanting to help you, but it was really a device, ladies and gentlemen, of intimidation and control. Now, as we know, in my personal situation, I passed the competence procedure with flying colors, and that was what I knew would happen. But the very fact that they put me under a competence procedure was to intimidate me and to make me feel as if I was worthless and didn't have any, to make me feel as if like I had no place being in that program. And this was all done at the behest of the US government and the Irish government. Now, I want to revert back to proxy threats, coercion by proxy as it relates to my sister. I believe there is a little bit of evidence that demonstrates that the Irish embassy in Austin, where my sister currently lives, that the Irish embassy, as well as, of course, the federal agents within our city, are attempting to befriend my sister, pretending that they are her friend, that they care about her. And I think that's what they did initially in the beginning, that they put on this, and again, Nisos is domiciled here, and this could very well be Nisos or Enzo. We know that Nisos is a cyber intelligence agency here in Belfast, and there is Enzo who sends that talent to Nisos. And so somebody reached out to my sister and attempted to connect with her. And I think for a moment she thought that the connection was genuine and that the persons were looking out for her best interest. I'm not really sure if she still believes that or not, but the reason they did that was that they were using this connection as a conduit to extract information from my sister so that they could use that information to harm me. And again, it is consistent with the interrogatories that they would give to my niece, give to my sister, give to my brother, to ask me questions that they felt would hit on the pressure points and get a reaction out of me. This was not the own doing of my family. I believe, and the evidence points to, a consistent pattern of intimidation by persons in positions of power. Now, we know that there was a competence procedure at Queen's University that I passed with flying colors, and a narrative that the agents of persecution used to drive me out of the university and have been using to isolate me so that they can facilitate abuse. And that is this allegation, this false allegation of having a mental health disorder. But we need to look at the facts, right? So there was an allegation of being paranoid, and which was false. And let's look at the facts. A paranoid person believes that someone is pursuing them all the time, and that threat is imminent. So a person that is paranoid will think that there is little green men, or a person with Jesus, or someone that is after them, or it's broad. Howsoever, a person who is being put through transnational repression may be alert in case danger might be present. A person that is going through transnational repression is not in a constant state of hypervigilance. They're not in a state of paranoia always. Like, I go out all the time, and I often sit with my back to people all the time. I often eat with, sometimes my back to people. I often walk at night alone. And those aren't any actions that a paranoid person would take. Now, you may say, well, what about hypervigilance? Well, a hypervigilant person, to reiterate, they would be alert in case there is danger, but the difference between a person that is experiencing transnational repression and then a hypervigilant person is that a person experiencing transnational repression is alert to the modalities of transnational repression being used, because they've been used so frequently and so consistently every single day. So there is no reason for the person to feel paranoid about the actions of the state or to be hypervigilant. They're just aware. Now, a paranoidic's fear of persecution is usually unfounded. Remember, we talked about this in another episode where I said I was going to expound on well-founded fear and unfounded fear, right? A paranoidic's fear of persecution is usually unfounded. But the person who is going through transnational repression, their victimization, persecution And being made a scapegoat is well-founded because there is a trail of evidence to demonstrate that. And the evidence, of course, in my particular case is being isolated. I have gone to a number of organizations to create community, and right when I did that, I had intelligence agencies coming in, swooping in, and severing those ties and isolating me from those communities. That's evidence. Another piece of evidence is my being in the university, pursuing a master's in international human rights law, going to write a dissertation on transnational repression, and passing all my modules only to come upon the dissertation. And then during this period where there was no activity, where there were no students in the university, to come to this period where they carried out this campaign so persistently to have me ejected from the university. That is victimization. My persecution in the Republic of Ireland, being persecuted after writing 2 critical pieces about the U.S. practices, how it's treating Black Americans, its police practices, and the practices of Black Americans the practices with indirect provision. So, as you can see, that is covering persecution, victimization, and being a scapegoat for the people in power. And another reason why they engage in this behavior, ladies and gentlemen, is because they want to place you in a state of anhedonia. They want you to lose enjoyment. And sometimes you got to push yourself to go out and have fun, or push yourself and go out and do the things that you once liked. Push yourself to go out and enjoy a meal, because that's what they want. They want you to lose in enjoyment for all of that you're only consumed with what they did to you, that you lose any drive for life in general, any enjoyment for life. And another purpose for that is to mar you in the state of radicalization, because it's easier to radicalize persons that are perhaps not going out and enjoying the things that they used to enjoy, to love again, to want to be in community. It's the whole purpose why they seek to isolate, to facilitate abuse, to cut you off from support structures, to cut you off from friends, to cut you off from family, to deny you the right to have justice, to stand in your way of accessing the courts. All of this is done to provoke you into carrying out an act that the state can frame as a threat to national security. There are other tactics, such as framing you as a spy. So, as I mentioned before, is it wrong to seek to divorce your country when your country has harmed you? Is it wrong to seek to divorce your country when your country has not lived up to the reputation that it has built for itself? Is it wrong to flee the country when the country has abused you so badly? And when you do this, the agents of persecution the agents of transnational repression seek to frame your narrative as you're a spy, that you're working for other nations, simply because you're seeking protection from those other nations. You must be a spy. And I believe that this is an affront to a person's dignity and human rights. Now, I want you to ask yourself this question. How can a person do two things at once? How can a person be two things at once? How can a person be a paranoid, a person who is unable to understand their environment and what's going on around them, and then also be a spy, able to understand their environment and what's going on around them, and able to give that information to foreign nations? That's absurd, isn't it? And this is a demonstration that there are holes in their story because it continues to fall apart. There continues to be a moving of the goalposts, a shifting of the narrative, a shifting of the reason why they're engaging in this kind of illegal activity. Now, I want to go back to, how do I know that this is Ireland and the United States? Well, foreign states would not select a foreign national they don't know to carry out acts of transnational repression. That would come with major consequences, right? And if a state decided that they did want to put me through transnational repression, that would likely be done on the behalf of course, the countries that I have somehow that would likely be so, for example, I think that would likely be, ladies and gentlemen, if the countries decided to do that on the behalf of the countries that were seeking to put me through transnational repression. So let's say, for instance, there's an argument that China or Russia or Iran was putting me through transnational repression. Well, the United States doesn't have a close relationship with China, and although it's rebuilding its connections with China, it's not a very close partnership. And so there is no way that China would put me through transnational repression for the United States of America. And to do it before the United States even knew about it. Now, what about Russia or Iran? So Russia, why would Russia put a foreign national through transnational repression? That never said anything about Russia, doesn't know anything about Russia, never been to Russia, never done anything to Russian people? That's absurd to say that that country would be involved. Yes, the United States does have a closer relationship to Russia than China, but ladies and gentlemen, Russia is embroiled in a war. Where does it have time to put a foreign national through transnational repression that it does not know? Now, let's talk about Iran. Now, when I wrote my piece was speaking about the enforced practice of hijabs in Iran. And some could argue, well, Kiana, this may be Iran that is perpetrating the acts of transnational repression against you. But we need to keep in mind that there were glimpses of this before I even wrote that piece. The very fact that this behavior was happening in direct provision was the catalyst that compelled me to write the piece in the jurist. So not Iran. So we're coming upon the end of this live stream, and I just want to say, ladies and gentlemen, that we really don't need to be afraid emotionally of the information that an intelligence agency, a cyber intelligence agency, would have and would attempt to use against us. We need not be afraid of that. And I would argue, put it all out there so they can listen to it, or put it all out there so they can see it. Because I don't want anyone to have a stranglehold on me. So if you have something on me, go ahead and put it out there. And let's have a conversation about it. Or let's have a discussion about it. Because again, I can guarantee you whatever they have, what I have, is 10 times stronger to refute that. And it reminds me of like these AI videos. I think that we're closing our discussion on coercion by proxy and comparing the comparative analysis of bullying and how agents of transnational repression carry out that, right? Those state crimes. But I found something very interesting, or at least saw something very interesting, and it was these AI videos. And it was of these people releasing or taking pictures or videos of persons while they were in a department store or a grocery store, and creating a video where a person is releasing pests in a grocery store, or creating a video of a person stealing something that they didn't steal from a grocery store or a department store, releasing a pest in a grocery store when they did not, and videos capturing a person who weren't in compromising positions, but the AI is putting them in compromising positions. And this has led to some devastating consequences, because some people have been accosted by security. Some people have been marched out of department stores and grocery stores. And we have recently seen a video of Thomas Massey and an AI video of Thomas Massey with AOC and Ilhan Omar holding their hands, which was a fake video, an AI video. And this is what really disturbs me, because if a person didn't know who Thomas Massey was, or didn't know who Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez was, or didn't know who Ilhan Omar was, if a person didn't know who these persons were, or if they didn't know who the person in the grocery store was, or the person in the department store, they would believe that information. And this is what is so destructive, I think, about AI. And this is what I think what we're headed to, is that AI is going to be used, ladies and gentlemen, as a tool of blackmail. Because, ladies and gentlemen, the public is only getting, the top of the iceberg of the AI. And then if you pay for, a larger pack, right, you may get other capabilities. So now you're a little bit beneath the iceberg. But we know that the creators in the intelligence agency, they're at the very bottom of the iceberg with how they're creating this information that could be used to blackmail people. And I'm glad that Gemini has embedded an encrypted synth ID into the images and into the videos that are being created. And I'm also glad that the European Union has decided to take a stance against AI and the way in which it can be used to engage in misogyny online and misogynoir. But not everyone has taken a stand. And it brings us back to our initial question, right? As to whether intelligence agencies are really the criminals that are engaging in criminality. Because when they create this blackmail information that is not true, creating an image of a person engaging in something that they didn't engage in. Now, I don't know if they've done that. I'm referencing the video of Ilhan Omar, Thomas Massie, and AOC. And with that, ladies and gentlemen, with that image or that video, I think that was deeply disturbing that they created that. To reiterate, not many people would have known about that if they didn't know who those politicians were. And so it raises an important question, doesn't it? Who created that? Because if it was a person, a cybersecurity agent that created that video of those politicians, and people in the public didn't know who they were, that would be very fraudulent, wouldn't it? It's not that I agree with any of the political positions that any of these politicians hold. It's simply that what was done to them was wrong because it had the potential to paint them in a negative light. It had the potential to harm them. And so, ladies and gentlemen, I want to move on to Houdon's et al.'s a piece which I think summarizes this clearly, and that is cyber psychopathy. What I think all of this amounts to is cyber psychopathy. And Houdon et al. Conceptualizes cyber psychopathy as digitally mediated syndrome characterized by manipulative behaviors such as cyber harassment, cyber interference, reward seeking, and more, cyberbullying as well. And I want you, as we end this, to think about whether or not this touches upon that. Whether or not this touches upon cyber psychopathy. Whether or not creating a deep fake touches upon cyber psychopathy. Whether cyber harassment and cyber intimidation touches upon cyber psychopathy. And there you have it, ladies and gentlemen. Don't forget to like this live stream. Don't forget to follow the video, follow me on Facebook, which is at Kiana Canada. I'll be uploading this possibly tomorrow or the next day to my YouTube channel at Real Kiana Canada. So don't forget to like it there and follow me there. And we'll talk to you next time. Bye-bye.